heart of your system.
I'm Leo Warder for Kit Guru. This eATX case is the GamerStorm NUARK 90. You may recall from Computex this year the company split its brands, so Deepcool is the lower end and GamerStorm is the upper end, and at £299 this is absolutely most definitely the upper end. As it happens, NUARK 90 the name, there never was an ARK 90, it just turns out that GamerStorm likes the sound of the word new, so it's not the ARK 90, it is the new ARK 90. Now that price, that's a worrying price because you want a lot of features for that sort of money. You get a glass panel, you get 4 140mm fans, you get a pre-installed liquid cooler for your CPU with a reservoir at the front which gives you some sort of visual bling, and you get RGB lighting. So that's all good stuff. Nonetheless, at that price, those features need to be extraordinarily well done. 4 thumb screws. Away with the panel. Spin the case around to reveal the back panel, which is ventilated. That is where the air goes out from the radiator. Air intake is this series of slits here on the top. I/O panel, you'll note, has 2 USB 3s but no USB 3.1 Type-C. And a second set of intake slits down the side of this very discreet cylindrical reservoir. Pull off the top panel, that's lift there, and unclip it. Same at the front, and away it comes. Remove the 3 securing screws here. Pull the lever, out comes a drive caddy, which is a bit of a pull because it's currently got a box of accessories in. And the next one down, which has a second box of accessories. And the third caddy at the bottom. GamerStorm has labelled each of these caddies with a number, so if you make a note of which drive is in which bay, I suppose it's easy to track it down. You can see the little number through the window in the lever, but when you open it you can see it's actually just a bit of a sticker. Many people don't appreciate the importance of a good power supply. A bad power supply can take out your motherboard, might even take out your processor. Seasonic has won more awards from Kit Guru over the past 10 years than any other company. Kit Guru recommends Seasonic. With the drive bays removed, it is clearer that these 3 140mm fans do not extend all the way down the back of the 280 radiator. Essentially the bottom fan is in the clear, and you can see now that that is drawing air through the drive cages. With the panels removed, just to reiterate, this is the top panel, so the air intake is on the one side, not on the other, and then that sits like so. And with the front panel, again, air intake on the one side, but not on the other, and that intake sits here. So air flows in and in through into the main compartment and is then taken out by the liquid cooler through the radiator and expelled through the vented side panel, or alternatively it flows through the compartment and out the back via this fan here. All fairly logical. It does remain to be seen just how well that cooling system actually works. Before I do the build, let's take a quick look at the accessories that you get. So CPU mounts there, tiny little tube of thermal interface. Essentially the cooler is compatible with every CPU socket that I care about, with the exception of Threadripper, so that's a good thing. Not that it excludes Threadripper, but it includes everything else, in particular Intel LGA 11X 2011 and also AM4, plus also older AMD stuff, if anyone's still using AM3. If you're using AM3, my advice to you is don't buy this case, upgrade your motherboard and CPU, okay? That's just a tip. Anyway, we have the user guide. Now, I mean, honestly, this is a £300 case and you get this. It's got the information that you want, but I don't know. I mean, more. I think more. That's what we're asking for here. And that's that. So to do the build, I need to remove the CPU block and pump unit from the carry plate, and then take that out. That's just that grey plate's just used while the case is in transit. So the grey plate comes out, motherboard goes in, CPU cooler goes on the CPU, all's good. It is also worth pointing out you have a bunch of expansion slots in the usual style. This is E80X, so there are indeed 8 of them, just as you'd expect. You've also got 2 vertical expansion slots. If you're using these, you need a PCI Express accessory cable which attaches to those points there, and then the card goes in. That accessory from Deepcool's £25 from their Amazon store, so you need to add that on. And in addition, it's worth pointing out that if it's an air-cooled card, obviously the face of the card is going to be fairly hard up against the glass. If you're going for a conventional air-cooled card in this orientation here, you can see that the top 2 slots are clear of this point here, but if you're using a really chunky 2.5 slot card from the likes of Asus, it's going to hang down past this point here. It's going to foul, in which case you're going to have to remove well, that's interesting. On the screws there's a bit nosh. But you're going to have to remove these vertical expansion slots. So someone hasn't really thought that one through to my mind, because if you're in the market for a £300 case, I think an aftermarket graphics card that's 2.5 slot is absolutely like to be on the cards. On the other hand, if you're going for a liquid cooled vertically mounted graphics card, that's absolutely fine, but you need a liquid cooling system to support it, don't you? Because of course this is just a CPU system, so you need a second pump reservoir radiator setup. So again, vertically mounted air cooled, not so great. Liquid cooled adds a whole different dimension to your build. Anyway, onward. You've got to admit, that build looks tidy. My build consists of an ASRock X299 Fatality Professional Gaming i9 motherboard. Processor is Intel Skylake X, that's a Core i9-7920X, that's a 12 core. Used that for the first time actually. I'm interested in how these higher core count processors behave under load. Cooler, as mentioned before, comes with the case, so that's a Captain 280mm. I'm still arguing in my mind whether it's a Deepcool or a Gamerstorm, as the case is Gamerstorm. Memory is from G.Skill, it's Trident ZRGB, 32GB in quad channel, and that's DDR4 3200. Graphics card, as you can see, is a Founders Edition RTX 2080, that's 8GB. Power supply, a 1000 watt Seasonic Prime Titanium, and we have an Intel 760p SSD, that's a 1TB, and the system's running Windows 10. The PC as a whole went together really easily, and there are 2 ways that I can look at this, and I'm genuinely torn as to which is the correct way of looking at it. As I said in the introduction, this is an expensive case, therefore my expectations are high. The build was very easy in the sense that you put the motherboard in place, put the CPU cooler on the CPU, and you're basically done. That's it, job done. On the other hand, if I wanted to extend the loop to a liquid cooled graphics card, I'd need to put a second cooling system in essentially, and the this is the bit that gets me. The RGB, you're essentially seeing it right now in its full bling mode. I can change it to a fixed colour, or I can have it on one colour that's breathing, but this is the best version of the lighting, and I'm deeply disappointed. It's cycling through some colours. You can see the hub of each fan is illuminated. I mean, the power supply cover and such, that's quite pretty, and the front and the top, they're quite pretty, but the fans are just pretty much as basic can be, and there is no header to connect to the motherboard, so I don't have the option of switching to a better form of RGB. This is as good as it gets, and this is where I'm completely torn, because my immediate instinct is that that's just terrible. But there is another point of view which says that if you want to do a quick and easy build where you stand back and you go, wow, RGB, job done, with no effort whatsoever, then in fairness this supplies that. There's no question about conflicts of software and such like. There is no software to conflict, it's just gonna work. So you might argue this is the easy approach, and you'd be correct. I'm just not quite sure I can live with that approach. You stand back, you look at the case, you go, yeah, it looks pretty. I mean, the references to the glass panels being obsidian-like, it's like, well, yeah, it's a black monolith, so I get that, but You've got RGB, but this is as good as it gets. So if you want more from your RGB, not great. If on the other hand you're looking at this going, yeah, it looks nice, then fine. The 4 fans in the case, so the 3 at the side, there are none in the front, and the 1 at the rear are rated at 1800 RPM. I tried 2 different settings. I tried 50%, which is 900 RPM. They were not excessively loud, and the case seemed to work quite nicely as a system. I then bumped up the speed to 75%, 1350 RPM, and I was really surprised. The temperatures did not respond the way that I expected. Temperatures, if anything, got worse. Now, I have no explanation for this, but I thought, well, I'm going to have to look into this a bit more closely. It's also worth commenting, by the by, that the fan hub around the rear, the PWM hub, the instructions say, as you'd expect, you've got your 3 fans connected to it and then connect it to your CPU header. I did that, and the motherboard wasn't correctly identifying the fans. It was seeing them as 0 RPM. So I moved the header to a water pump header on the motherboard, and it then seemed to work absolutely fine, which suggests obviously a water pump header will be more highly powered. 3 fans, not surprising, it draws more power than 1 fan. But if you have a water pump header, I would suggest on your motherboard that is the one to go for. What I can't be absolutely certain of is how this case is going to respond with those 3 fans connected up to a standard PWM header. They worked correctly, it's just the motherboard didn't quite understand what it was seeing, so it would seem to me to be borderline. I ran the 4 fans at 50%, the system worked nicely, increased the speed, the temperatures did not respond the way that I expected. I tried the case with the top removed, with the front removed, and with both the top and the front removed. And it was a funny thing to behold, because it is quite... I mean, I had my doubts that the case was actually breathing all that well in the first place, because it seemed to me the intakes were quite restricted. And yet, not so. It was curious. As a system, the case appears to be actually quite nicely designed. The graphics card suffers when you open up the case, which doesn't particularly shock me. We've seen this a few times before. The case is often designed to flow air in a certain way, and when you take off panels, you muck up the airflow. On the other hand, the CPU, with the case fully open, breathed quite nicely. As you start closing it up, it starts to suffer somewhat, which suggests that air flowing to that side radiator is restricted. But then that's common sense. You have to have more air flowing in if you take off the panels. I mean, that's just obvious. The question is it a problem? And the answer is no, it's not. With the case closed up, I was seeing temperatures around the 60 Celsius mark with both panels closed, and that's with that 12-core CPU hammering away and the RTX 2080 hammering away. Those temperatures I was actually quite impressed by, which entirely turned around my opinion of the case. I was expecting it to behave in a certain way. I thought it was all about the flash and the bling, and the air intakes were going to be bad, going to be restricting it, going to make it not so. Absolutely not what I expected. And if I'm being entirely blunt, that was also the reason why I went for high-end hardware in this big case, partly because it's an E80X case. It needs to have proper hardware, but otherwise it just looks blooming silly. As it stands, there's a load of space in there anyway. It just seemed to me I'd be doing it a disservice if I didn't put a proper graphics card in and a proper processor. I did that, and it came through like an absolute champ. So in that respect, the new Arc 90 completely defied my expectations, and fair play to GamerStorm for that, I say. So pulling back, building the system dead easy, cooling impressive, the looks, I like them. I mean, it reflects light like crazy. It's an absolute swine to photograph. But in terms of the bling factor, yeah, it's got it. When you turn it on, you get the RGB, it's good. The lack of RGB control, ooh, I don't like that one little bit. I really do not. But it gives you entry-level RGB on 1, 2, well, 3, 4, 5 surfaces. I mean, basically, the back panel is solid. Apart from that, it's all go. And it looks impressive. But the fact you don't have integration with your motherboard, I don't like that. The fact the fans only have an illuminated hub and you don't get... I mean, we've seen so many good RGB fans recently. This is as basic as it gets, really basic. And the problem is you're paying for the privilege. God, are you paying for... £299. It is $299 elsewhere. I have checked. We are suffering, you know, the extra hurt here, and that obviously colours my judgment, because it should be, at least in my opinion, £50 cheaper, £249, which is still a lot of money. But then you are getting a 280mm cooler. You must remember the cooling system is part of it, plus the reservoir on the front. So if it was $249, I'd be a lot happy. If it was $199, it'd be a whole different proposition. It'd be, even though it's quite a lot of money, you're getting a lot for your money. $199 would be cheap. $249 I feel about right. $299, which is what we're paying here in the UK, is very ouchy, but we are almost a unique case globally in terms of the pricing. Overall, this case has delivered more than I expected. I honestly thought it was going to be choked for airflow, and I didn't expect it to look quite as impressive when it was running. So good in that respect, eh? If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you don't, give it a thumbs down. If you want more from Kit Guru, click to subscribe. I'm Leo Waldock. This is the Gamerstorm Newark 90.